Let's now talk about speech acts and critical discourse analysis. Speech acts are an important component of conventional theory of pragmatics. Speech acts looks into how we do certain things while saying something. So the basic belief which is behind the theory of speech acts is that we do not only say things with words, rather we do perform things with words, and the things we perform through words are called speech acts. This view is quite against the traditional view of logical positivists who believe that the basic function of language is to inform people about the truth and falseness of certain statements, and therefore explaining the meanings of the statements. But the proponents of speech acts believe that the basic function of language is not only to tell the truth or falsity of the words, rather to look deep into the meanings of the words by relating the words with their context, and just imagining, just bringing it on the surface, that what kind of action has actually been performed. This theory, in other words, thrives on the discrepancy between what is said and what is meant. So speech acts are actually what is meant by a certain statement. In other words, people do perform actions through their use of language. They employ the same statement to perform various actions in their daily life. For example, the same statement can be said differently in different situations, and that might convey different meanings. I mean, I need water in a normal situation, maybe a very ordinary statement, but when somebody is really thirsty, I need water might have some loaded meaning and urgency of the provision of the water. So there could be many other situations. We do perform various kinds of speech acts on daily basis. For example, we give orders, we place requests, we give warnings, advices, and we consult each other for various reasons. All these speech acts are performed through language. So language is not only the carrier of literal meanings, rather it also carries a lot of hidden, deep, pragmatic meanings, which actually constitute the speech acts of that language, or speech acts being performed by that language through a speaker, obviously. To do things that go beyond the literal meaning is actually the real thrust of speech acts. What is said is important, but what is meant is more important. In this way, we need to see that what one says and what one intends. The intention of the speaker is the real meaning or real speech act which is being performed by it. If we just look around and look your daily activities, we perform so many speech acts in the same fashion, in which we say something else and we mean something else. I give you one example which is on your screen also. If I just say it's hot here, it may be a piece of information for some people who's listening to me, but it may be a kind of request to others who might understand that the weather is very hot here, and you probably switch on, if you can, switch on the fan or AC here, so that the weather becomes moderate inside. In this situation, it's hot air is not a piece of information which it appears on surface that the weather is hot inside this room. But in fact, it's a request to switch on a fan or air conditioner so that weather becomes pleasant. So again, I would say, if you just look into your daily conversation, we perform so many speech acts every day on this pattern. There could be three kinds of speech acts. One is Locationary Act, which is based on, or this can be seen as three aspects of a speech act also. Locationary Act is basically the basic or literal meanings of the words we say. A Locationary Act is a speaker's intention in uttering a word, what or she means. For example, in the previous examples I just mentioned, it's hot here. The illocationary force is to switch on the fan, and it's not to convey the weather information, whereas the locationary force is to convey the message that weather is hot inside. So, and illocationary, I repeat, illocationary force is to switch on the force. But perlocationary act is the effect of an utterance on the thoughts or actions of the other person. For example, somebody who's listening to me may understand my message and switch on the fan, and there could be somebody who do not understand the message, what I'm trying to say, and he may not switch on the fan, and he would probably consider it a mere information about the weather. So perlocationary force, though it emerges from illocationary or locationary force, but it may be different sometimes from general expectations. Let's have a look at another example. If you just look at the statement on the top, it says, bus driver is saying to some boys who are standing in the middle of the gate of a bus, says, this bus won't move until you boys move in out of the doorway. In short, कि ये बस नहीं चलेगी जब तक आप बस का दरवाज़ा क्लियर नहीं करेंगे. This could be seen as a kind of advice or a kind of warning. Plainly, this is just a piece of message. Illocationary force, maybe it's a serious warning that I won't drive the bus. It won't move further, and you won't reach your destination if you stand in there. And its force could be that its perlocationary force, its effect could be the hearer may get in, or they may get out of the bus also. They may scold with the driver, why would he say that? Or they may simply comply with what has been said to them by the driver. So there are multiple possibilities as far as the perlocationary force is concerned. The identification of the illocationary force may depend on the stage in which discourse is. Maybe a simple word or a phrase in a certain situation would mean differently, and in another situation would probably mean absolutely differently. Let's take a simple example of a word okay. The word okay may be a continuer. If we are in the middle of communication, somebody is saying something to you, is conveying a message, and you and you say okay, and that would mean continue. I mean, I'm listening. And if you are at the end of the communication, or if you want to end the communication, you probably would say okay, I got it completely. So that would be a signal of closing the communication. Or it could be an expression of agreement also. Somebody is suggesting something, you say okay. That means you're agreeing to what is being said. An utterance may have more than one illocationary force at the same time, because human language is such an interesting phenomena. The same word or sentence or utterance can be used to convey multiple meanings simultaneously. Let's look into the division between direct speech acts and indirect speech acts. Direct speech acts are those where the form and the meaning are approximately the same. When what is said, if a question is being said and the form of the utterance is question, and the meaning is also question, then we say it's a direct speech act. But if the form and meaning are absolutely different, then it would be called direct speech act according to certain classifications of these direct and indirect speech acts. For example, if you look at the statement down here, bring a plate is a very plain statement. It's an order, imperative, and this clearly, the form is also of an imperative and order, and the meaning is also of the same nature. But if you look at the other statement, can I take your order now, please? It's a kind of question. You can say, can I take your order right now? That means, as far as form is concerned, is a question. But if you look at the meaning in daily language use, you will see that it's a kind of request to place your order. So this cannot be a direct speech act. This is an indirect speech act. Similarly, the case with other examples there, can I have a cheeseburger? And then the last statement, I'll have 2 pieces of chicken and a Coke. This is a plain statement. Here the purpose is to demand a certain food items. Therefore, the form and the meaning are the same. This can be called a direct speech act. Let's see further. Indirect speech act, as I said, there is a difference in the form and the meaning. Therefore, it becomes very difficult for a second language learner to understand it. And that's why this part is very critical in critical discourse studies also, because certain skillful speakers or authors use language in such a tricky and indirect way that it becomes very difficult to gauge their real meanings for ordinary readers or listeners. If you just look at some other statements down here, the room is a real mess. This statement looks like a kind of conveying certain information or kind of opinion that this room is a real mess. But in certain context, especially native context, this statement is usually used to request somebody who may be sitting nearby to help you to clear the mess from there. Then, would you mind helping me move this table? It's a kind of request here. The real meanings are of request to help somebody out, but again, it's a kind of, as far as form is concerned, it's just a statement of question. Here are some more examples of direct speech acts. For example, if you see, did you eat the pizza? It's interrogative and it's clearly a question. And then eat the pizza, please. It's imperative and clearly an imperative. You ate the pizza. This is a declarative statement and clear. There is no difference in the form and the function here. Therefore, we can say these are the examples of direct speech acts. If you look further, examples of indirect speech acts, we see, can you pass the salt? Looks like a question of ability. Can you pass the salt? क्या आप ऐसा कर सकते हैं? But in fact, it is not a question of ability. When we say that, we actually request to another person to pass the salt to us. Then you left the door open. It seems like a simple statement of information that you left the door open, but it actually implies in most of the situations that you should keep door closed. You should go and shut the door because you left it open. It's a kind of implied message. So this can be seen as a perfect example of indirect speech act. Alright, one of the reasons why indirect speech acts are used more frequently in our communication, it may not be entirely a linguistic matter, but it would be, in most of the situations, would be a social or cultural matter. In many cultures across the world, we see that indirect speech acts are used to convey bad messages in a polite manner. So for the sake of politeness, good communication, gentle behavior, we usually employ indirect speech acts so that the receiver of the message may not be offended.